So welcome back to another episode, and I'm holding back a very small tear here because this is the last of the big anniversaries for the year, and this is one that I read about a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh my god, it's coming up to that anniversary. And as I say, the hairs on my head were feeling a little bit more gray. I started to feel a little bit more stiffness in all my joints as I realized that 25 years have gone by since I first played Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. And this is a very crappy looking copy of the game. As I said, I think I got it at a Blockbuster, quite a few years afterwards, for actually a reasonable price of around $20, and this goes for over $100 now. I wish I had a better copy of it, but that's the way things go. Now, I just couldn't believe it that 25 years ago, I was playing Final Fantasy II, and this was Final Fantasy IV in Japan. It was renamed Final Fantasy II because we only got the first one. So when they brought over 4, they're like, well, we better call it 2 because we only gave them the first one. And this is so fun to talk about, isn't it? Do you guys remember? A lot of you guys out there right now, do you remember when Final Fantasy II first came onto the Super Nintendo? The hype, the excitement, and I remember it all very, very well. And I remember this Nintendo Power right here. I dug this up for this very special occasion. It is the Final Fantasy II issue where they show everything related to Final Fantasy II. The hype, the excitement, everything that we were getting with the game. And I just want to show you a little bit there. It's just unreal. Beautiful looking stuff. And it's hard to... I know a lot of younger guys and gals are watching, and I want you to know it gets weirder and weirder the older you get, looking back on games that you used to play when you were younger. And when you hit milestones like 25 years ago, passing, you're in awe. It makes you feel really strange. And you just cannot believe the passage of time. You really can't. And for me, you guys know with me, is that I have a bit of a photographic memory when it comes to video game emotions and memories. They were very, very important to me throughout my entire life. And I remember the game was coming out, and I went to my parents, and I'm like, please, dear parents, and it was just before Christmas, obviously today, and I went to them and I said, please, Final Fantasy II is coming out. I love Final Fantasy 1. I'm such a huge fan. I'll do anything around here. I'll clean the house. I'll do whatever you want me to do, sweep leaves, everything. And they're like, no, you wait for Christmas. Wait for Christmas. I'm like, and it's like, it was something, I wasn't a spoiled kid. I was just like, no, I want to play the game now because it's like, I'm so hyped, I'm going to explode. And I was going to explode because I love the first game so much. And I was like, this game's on the Super Nintendo, folks. This ain't nothing to joke around about. This is a huge, huge game. And they're like, just wait for Christmas. And I'm like, so deflated and so like, oh, I felt blah. And so anyways, that was that. And then, of course, you guys know my friend Andrew. I've told this story before. I went down the street and I knocked on his door and I went down into his basement, and there he was playing Final Fantasy II on his Super Nintendo. And as I walked up to the door, I could hear this music playing. And I remember it now to be the Tower of Zot. He was at that point in the game. He was playing it for days on end. He's missing a day of school here and there just to complete the game because it was so cool. And I was so jealous. I stood there like I did when Phantasy Star came out, and my mouth was wide open. I was like staring at the screen. I couldn't believe the graphics of the game at the time. I couldn't believe the combat and the animation, and as I said earlier, the music. I was like, because this is before the internet. The first time I got to hear the music of Final Fantasy II was playing on the Super Nintendo. It wasn't, I didn't see cutscenes and I didn't see anything ahead of time. There was no YouTube. That didn't exist. I walked in and this is how I saw it. And that's why back then games had a huge impact on a person who was into video games, because you'd never seen this game playing before. It was the first time and you were like in absolute shock. And I was so jealous of Andrew. And he was so nonchalant. He's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm doing this. And I walked home that night, and there was a cloud over me as the darkness kicked in, and I think I asked my parents again. I said, Andrew's playing this game. They're waiting for Christmas. I'm like, okay, and I just knew that Andrew would be finished this game in like another week, and I'd borrow his Sloppy Seconds edition, and that's exactly what happened. He finally finished the game, and I said, Andrew, can I borrow the game? He's like, well, I just got the game. I'm like, please. And he's like, okay. And he was nice enough to lend it to me, and I was very, very careful with his copy of the game. And this is the thing. I've got this memory. I'll never forget it. I skipped school. I skipped the afternoon of school, and I came home, and I started playing it, and it was absolutely fantastic. The opening with the Mode 7 and the airships flying over the land to Baron, and you're first introduced to Cecil and his troops, and you start finding out about the storyline, and it was so fantastic. I loved role-playing games, but remember back then, there wasn't a plethora of RPGs like there is now, so when you got an RPG, it was something special, and I at the time knew it was something special, and it was so cozy being inside, and I was right close to the TV because of that controller. It was very short, right? So I was like right up to the TV. I was right in it, and I was having so much fun. And then the girl I was going out with at the time, she showed up, and she had brought all this candy from 7-Eleven, and she sat right beside me, and we were like, I know this also sounds terrible. As you guys know, I was a smoker back then. And she brought a pack of cigarettes, which was a big deal. Like, oh my God, you have cigarettes? And we sat and smoked cigarettes, ate candy, and played Final Fantasy II. And I'll never forget that memory in my entire life of how much fun I was having. And the game lived up to the hype that I was seeing at my friend Andrew's place. And I just adored it. I gotta say, even all these years later, the music, still to this day, by Nobu, is second to none. It beats soundtracks of modern RPGs. It hits emotional notes in this game. This game is a very emotional roller coaster ride with our characters in the storyline. There's humans live on the surface, dwarves live underground, and then there's this mysterious moon as well, this kind of artificial moon, and that's the basic story. And it's about Cecil going off to become a paladin, and that's the basics of it. And there's so much emotion within the music that drives the story, and there's so many impactful moments within this game that can bring a person to tears at times. And I know a lot of my friends who have tattoos on their shoulder of characters from this game of Cecil, because this game really had such an impact on their lives. And it's so funny. So even when me and that girl broke up, I mentioned it in my Girls and Games episode, is that the overworld music, we'd broken up, and I was like, oh God, we're broken up, and I was so sad about it. And I laid back on the bed, and the overworld music of Final Fantasy brought, intensified that breakup. Whenever I hear that music still to this day, it always reminds me of that breakup and that moment in time, and just such treasured memories. And I could spend hours talking about Final Fantasy II. I guess for so many of you guys out there, you hold this game in such reverence, and it deserves to be in such reverence because it's such a beautiful game, and it really is, such a moment and a memory for me from my childhood. And oh my God, I can't believe it's been 25 years. Sitting in that basement, having those cigarettes, and having that candy, and 25 years, boom, has gone by like that. And it's wonderful, guys, to be able to talk to you and to share my memories with you, and to talk about how impactful and how memorable some of these games have been to me over the years. They haven't just been games. They haven't just been ones and zeros, and they got some pretty graphics and a nice box art and nothing like that. Some of these games are emotionally tuned into my entire life, and Final Fantasy II has a very, very special place in my life, for sure. So anyways, guys, until next time.